Chapter 24. Let Them Laugh. The secret garden was not the only one that Dickon worked in. Round the cottage on the moor there was a piece of ground enclosed by a low wall of rough stones. Early in the morning and late in the fading twilight, and all the days that Colin and Mary did not see him, Dickon worked there, planting or tending potatoes and cabbages, turnips and carrots, and herbs for his mother. In the company of his creatures he did wonders there, and was never tired of doing them, it seemed. While he dug or weeded he whistled, or sang bits of Yorkshire moor songs, or talked to Soot or Captain, or the brothers and sisters that he had taught to help him. "We'd never get on comfortable as we do," Mrs. Sowerby said, "if it weren't for Dickon's garden. Anything'll grow for him. His taters and cabbages is twice the size of anyone else's, and they've got a flavour with them as nobody's has." When she found a moment to spare, she liked to go out and talk to him. After supper there was still a long clear twilight to work in, and that was her quiet time. She could sit upon the low rough wall and look on and hear stories of the day. She loved this time. There were not only vegetables in this garden. Dickon had bought penny packages of flower seeds now and then, and sown bright, sweet-scented things amongst the gooseberry bushes and even cabbages, and he grew borders of mignonette and pinks and pansies, whose seeds he could save year after year, or whose roots would bloom each spring and spread in time into fine clumps. The low wall was one of the prettiest things in Yorkshire, because he had tucked more than foxgloves and ferns and rock cress and hedgerow flowers into every crevice, until only here and there glimpses of the stones were to be seen. "All chap's got to do to make 'em thrive, mother," he would say, "is to be friends with 'em for sure. They're just like creatures. If they're thirsty, give 'em a drink, and if they're hungry, give 'em a bit of food. They want to live same as we do. If they died, I should feel as if I'd been a bad lad and somehow treated them heartless." It was in these twilight hours that Mrs. Sowerby heard of all that happened at Misselthwaite Manor. At first she was only told that Mester Colin had taken a fancy to going out into the grounds with Miss Mary, and that it was doing him good. But it was not long before it was agreed between the two children that Dickon's mother might come into the secret. Somehow it was not doubted that she was safe for sure. So one beautiful still evening Dickon told the whole story, with all the thrilling details of the buried key and the robin and the grey haze which had seemed like deadness, and the secret Miss Mary had planned never to reveal. The coming of Dickon, and how it had been told to him, the doubt of Mr. Colin, and the final drama of his introduction to the hidden domain, combined with the incident of Ben Weatherstaff's angry face peering over the wall and Mester Colin's sudden indignant strength, made Mrs. Sowerby's nice-looking face quite change colour several times. "My word," she said, "it were a good thing that little lass came to the manor. It's been making of her and the saving of him. Standing on his feet, and us all thinking he was a poor half-witted lad with not a straight bone in him." She asked a great many questions, and her blue eyes were full of deep thinking. "What do they make of it at manor, him being so well and cheerful and never complain?" she inquired. "They don't know what to make of it," answered Dickon. "Every day as comes round his face looks different. He's filling out and doesn't look so sharp, and waxy colour is going. But he has to do his bit of complaining," with a highly entertained grin. "What for, in mercy's sake?" asked Mrs. Sowerby. Dickon chuckled. "He does it to keep 'em from guessing what's happened. If the doctor knew he'd found out he could stand on his feet, he'd likely write and tell Mester Craven, and Mester Colin's saving secret to tell himself. He's going to practise his magic on his legs every day till his father comes back, and then he's going to march into his room and show him he's as straight as other lads. But him and Miss Mary think it's best plan to do a bit of groaning and fretting now and then to throw off the scent." Mrs. Sowerby was laughing a low, comfortable laugh long before he had finished his last sentence. "Eh," she said, "that pair's enjoying themselves, I'll warrant. They'll get a good bit of play-acting out of it, and there's nothing children likes as much as play-acting. Or let's hear what they do, Dickon lad." Dickon stopped weeding and sat up on his heels to tell her. His eyes were twinkling with fun. "Mr. Colin is carried down to his chair every time he goes out," he explained, "and he flies out at John, the footman, for not carrying him careful enough. He makes himself as helpless looking as he can, and he never lifts his head until we're out at sight at house. And he grunts and frets a good bit when he's being settled into his chair. Him and Miss Mary's both got to enjoying it, and when he groans and complains, she'll say, 'Poor Colin, does it hurt you so much? Are you so weak as that, poor Colin?' But trouble is that sometimes they can scarce keep from bursting out laughing. When we get safe into the garden, they laugh till they've got no breath left to laugh with, and they have to stuff their faces into Mr. Colin's cushions to keep the gardeners from hearing if any of them's are about." "The more than laugh the better for 'em," said Mrs. Sowerby, still laughing herself. "Good healthy child laughing's better than pills any day of the year. That pair are plump up for sure." "They are plumping up," said Dickon. "They're that hungry they don't know how to get enough to eat without making talk. Mr. Colin says if you keep sending for more food, they won't believe he's an invalid at all. Miss Mary says she'll let him eat her share, but he says that if she goes hungry she'll get thin, and they mun both get fat at once." Mrs. Sowerby laughed so heartily at the revelation of this difficulty that she quite rocked backwards and forwards in her blue cloak, and Dickon laughed with her. "I'll tell thee what, lad," Mrs. Sowerby said when she could speak. "I've thought of a way to help 'em. When they goes to 'em at morning, thou shalt take a pail of good new milk, and I'll bake 'em a crusty cottage loaf or some buns with currants in 'em, same as you children like. Nothing so good as fresh milk and bread, and then they could take off edge of their hunger while they were in the garden, and the fine food that they get indoors would polish off the corners." "Eh, mother," said Dickon admiringly, "what a wonder thou art! Thou always sees a way out of things. They was quiet in a pother yesterday. They didn't see how they was to manage without ordering up more food, they felt that empty inside. They're two young uns, growing fast, and health's coming back to both of them. Children like that feels like young wolves, and food's flesh and blood to 'em," said Mrs. Sowerby, and then she smiled at Dickon's own curving smile. "Eh, but they're enjoying themselves for sure," she said. And she was quite right, the comfortable, wonderful mother creature, and she had never been more so than when she said their play-acting would be their joy. Colin and Mary found it one of their most thrilling sources of entertainment. The idea of protecting themselves from suspicion had been unconsciously suggested to them first by the puzzled nurse, and then by Dr. Craven himself. "Your appetite is improving very much, Master Colin," the nurse had said one day. "You used to eat nothing, and so many things disagreed with you." "Nothing disagrees with me now," replied Colin, and then seeing the nurse looking at him curiously, he suddenly remembered that perhaps he ought not to appear too well just yet. "Well, at least things don't so often disagree with me. It's the fresh air." "Perhaps it is," said the nurse, still looking at him with a mystified expression. "But I must talk to Dr. Craven about it." "How she stared at you," said Mary, when she went away, "as if she thought there must be something to find out." "I won't have her finding out things," said Colin. "No one must begin to find out yet." When Dr. Craven came that morning, he seemed puzzled too. He asked a number of questions, to Colin's great annoyance. "You stay out in the garden a great deal," he suggested. "Where do you go?" Colin put on his favourite air of dignified indifference to opinion. "I will not let anyone know where I go," he answered. "I go to a place I like. Everyone has orders to keep out of the way. I won't be watched and stared at. You know that." "You seem to be out all day, but I don't think it's done you any harm." "I don't think so. The nurse says that you eat much more than you've ever done before." "Perhaps," said Colin, prompted by a sudden inspiration, "perhaps it's an unnatural appetite." "I don't think so. Your food seems to agree with you," said Dr. Craven. "You're gaining flesh rapidly, and your colour is better." Perhaps I am bloated and feverish," said Colin, assuming a discouraging air of gloom. "People who are not going to live are often different." Dr. Craven shook his head. He was holding Colin's wrist, and he pushed up his sleeve and felt his arm. You're not feverish," he said thoughtfully, "and such flesh as you have gained is healthy. If we can keep this up, my boy, we need not talk of dying. Your father will be very happy to hear of this remarkable improvement." "I will not have him told," Colin broke forth fiercely. "It will only disappoint him if I get worse again. And I may get worse this very night. I might have a raging fever. I feel as if I might be beginning to have one now. I won't have letters written to my father. I won't. Oh, you're making me angry. You know that's bad for me. I feel hot already. I hate being written about and being talked over as much as I hate being stared at." "Hush, hush, my boy," Dr. Craven soothed him. "Nothing shall be written without your permission. You're too sensitive about things. You must not undo the good which has been done." He said no more about writing to Mr. Craven, and when he saw the nurse he privately warned her that such a possibility must not be mentioned to the patient. "The boy is extraordinarily better," he said. "His advance seems almost abnormal. But, of course, he is doing now of his own free will what we could not make him do before. Still, he excites himself very easily, and nothing must be said to irritate him." Mary and Colin were very much alarmed and talked together anxiously, and from this time dated their plan of action.